Okay, I'm so excited today to be talking to you all on behalf of DuSable, the DuSable Museum here in Chicago. Are you all familiar with DuSable Museum?
Of
Absolutely.
course.
Good.
Highly.
Yes.
Yes, it is the oldest African American museum in the country. So I'm excited about that. I'm also I'm excited about having you all on our platform. I'm also very excited about this movie, a dedication to mothers, mamas. Whose idea? How did you come up with that idea, Miss Shantrelle?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm gonna try to make it as brief as possible. I've done work for the past decade centered around Black masculinity, particularly through the lens of global Black dandyism. And in fact, talking about Chicago, shout out to MOCP, the Museum of Contemporary Photography, where my Dandelion exhibition, it didn't even premiere there, but this was like maybe the 5th, 6th year of the exhibition. And so it was held there. It was like the largest show ever. Like thousands of people came out, to see the show. Was their highest attendance ever. And so I had been looking at Black masculinity, and actually I'm a Lukumi Shango priest. And it was during a spiritual reading that I was told I need to do some work around women, like Black women. I'm like, wait, what? Because we got a lot of stuff to unpack, and I didn't know I was quite ready for that. And so just looking at my own relationship with my own mom, beginning mothering through full-time parenting my 2 bonus kids, it just made me really want to reflect on my own experiences, my mama's experiences, our grandmother's experiences, the women that raised us, to kind of like understand who we are, and how we need to be.
Wow. I think it's very interesting that a lot of us who do this work, looking at us, our families, our history, and things like that, that we start with the Black man, because I did too. And then at some point, you're like, okay, the ladies have got kind of getting left behind. But that speaks to a lot that was mentioned in the movies that we're in your film, that we're caretakers and we generally attend to others first,
Right.
right? So the same way we study the Black men first, and then we say, you know what? I think the mamas are pretty important. We probably need to shift a little bit and do some work with the Black mamas. And
Yep.
so I want to know from you all, what was it like creating this film? What were your greatest challenges personally? And then as a film, was it difficult to get the film made and to get other people to focus this attention on Black mothers?
To be honest, getting the film made was the easiest part because it was all divine. Whomever you believe in, God, the ancestors, the river, the ocean, the stars, had their hands all up in this. I tell people my grandmother co-directed with me from the beyond the grave, because the way that spirit was moving and working, everything kind of just flowed like the river, and in Yoruba culture, Oshun is the river. And so when you go to a school like Howard University, and you have squad and village and family like JaSaun, I'm able to call JaSaun without hesitation. She said yes. I call Erica Miss Global Trotting, find me on a beach in some island you don't even know the name of, and I'm gonna fly into New York and sit and talk about my mother, I'm gonna say yes. So in terms of making the film, everything was so divine. Even the process of the film getting picked up, immediately being put on Netflix, raising money that we needed to raise, it was like effortless. As it relates to that, it was effortless. Just, I'm grateful, and I'm just thankful to my community. I feel blessed and highly favored, and I'm just thankful.
Okay. Wow. So there were no challenges. It was all easy.
I didn't say that.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Anytime, I'll tell you this, Kim, anytime you're putting work out into the world that is going to disrupt and shift toxicity, that's going to disrupt dysfunction and generational wounds and trauma, there's going to be some problems. There's going to be a lot of problems because the devil be busy, but the devil is a liar. You know what I'm saying? And so what is Harriet Tubman, what is like the Haitians and the Haitian Revolution, Maroons that was trying to get free down south and escape off of plantations. Whenever you're trying to do something to change society, and we're talking about, when you heal Black women, you understand we healing the world.
Yeah. The world.
Global society. So I didn't say it was without problems, but what I'm saying, making the film itself, because these stories needed to be told. That's the part that was effortless. And it was all with whatever valleys and hell and high water that had to be climbed through and swam through and dragged through. It made the whole process all worth it.
Okay. You know what I just realized? We didn't introduce you all. Can you say your name and say what your role was in this film project?
I'm gonna ask my co-attendees to go first since we're in Chi-Town. So, my mama taught me well. My mama, Patricia Calvin Scott. So I'm gonna ask my sisters to introduce themselves to begin with.
Go ahead, Jace.
I'm JaSaun Buckner, and I am a producer on In Our Mother's Gardens. Very proud Chicagoan, very proud Howard Bison, and my pride is immeasurable for the work that we've all put into this film.
I'm Erica Sewell. I was asked by Shantrelle to come into this project, this beautiful project, and talk about my mother, Miss Iris, who she's heard about anecdotally and met and seen enough to know that that would be probably something that would be entertaining. And I'm also was asked to be an executive producer as well. And very proud of this project.
Oh, it's my turn. It's like, I'm Shantrelle P. Lewis. I'm the film's director, executive producer, and there were many other roles that I played because as a creative, you wear many different hats, but those are the roles that are most significant, and just, excited to be sharing this story in Chicago with my family, JaSaun and Erica are family. So, and I have lots of blood family, my brother, my niece and nephew, my niece's family, they're all Chicagoans, and as well as one of my line sisters, Maya Camille Broussard from Justice of the Pie. So, hey to all my Chi-Town fam.
I think that's important. That's probably why I felt so at home watching the film, is because we got all this Chicago flavor up in there. and as I have discovered, Trinity flavor, from Trinity United Church of Christ. I'm a member, and a couple of you, Erica and JaSaun, are members as well. Isn't that interesting? I'm gonna have to call Reverend Wright and let him know that. So tell me, what was your objective in doing it? When you first came up with, I want to do this movie, was your first thought, I want to do this film about this documentary about women, about mothers, and what did you hope to achieve by doing this film? What were you hoping that came from the film?
So we're all Generation Xers, like JaSaun, Erica and I, we're 78 babies. And, our mothers are baby boomers. And the objective was like looking at their stories in order to heal ourselves, like to unpack their stuff, to figure ourselves out, to talk about self-care. Because it's used as a buzzword, but like that real messy, sloppy work of reckoning with yourself, that's something very few people are willing to do. And so in the effort to like save my own life and not go down the same path as so many other women that I know, it was important for me to like what were their survival strategies and their self-care secrets? And in the film, what I came to understand was, they had a lot of coping mechanisms, not necessarily self-care and, not self-care or healing per se, but there's a lot of coping and survival. And doing what they had and what they needed to do to get by. And so I thought it was, a responsibility for us to learn from their experiences so that we could make different choices, right now in our lives, and to create a better future for those young women coming behind us.
Yeah. And you all, what do you think?
I mean, I was just going to add just to that note, I knew what the premise of the project was when Shantrelle said, hey, come and talk about your mother. But in rewatching it, what I thought was really interesting on the self-care note is the diversity of stories that you were able to weave in, Shantrelle. It wasn't one note, right? It wasn't all trauma. It wasn't all, from even the same perspectives in terms of the diaspora. You brought in all of the different perspectives, and it's interesting because I feel like even my inclusion in the film, because I don't have, to my knowledge, any trauma that I'm harboring with my mother in particular to heal. But even in thinking about your line of questioning as a director, Shantrelle, in that interview, you were very much asking me for my coping mechanisms. And when I look back at it and I was listening to myself talking about spot cleaning, I was like, oh yeah, I cope too. That is a coping mechanism, right? That is a tool that was passed down.
I highlighted that in my notes. That's
yeah. And it's funny because one thing that me and my mother have this really funny dialogue going right now, because I've been like, oh, I need to get a therapist, because that's what people my age do, right? We just get therapists where, young women who have the luxury and the privilege to be able to understand and identify that could be helpful. And we might have the time to do that. And my mother's joke is like, okay, she better not say nothing about our family though. like you could go to therapy, but everything is fine, and it's
okay, right.
Like I agree with that, but at the same time, I mean, I agree with the fact that I don't know any clear and present issues to unearth in terms of my parenting, right? Mm-hmm. But like it's like comical, but it's also kind of like, we really are not trying to touch anything that disrupts the groove, Mm-hmm. So I just love the balance that you were able to pull out of the film with that, Shantrelle.
Thanks, friend.
Me too. And in putting the film together, and we were working on different aspects of putting it together, from when Shantrelle started in 2018 and then when I came in 2019. So in addition to telling the stories and showing different women and their relationships with their mothers, it's also how the storytelling was layered and put together. So you have your more traditional sit-down interviews, and then we also created spaces for other voices and stories to come in and have that look and feel and sound special and unique for those stories. And then there are these, what Shantrelle calls commercials, or little pockets of real levity. But every single piece of the film, from the music to the still visuals and the moving visuals, they add to the story. Not everyone can necessarily relate to, Erica speaking about her mother directly to camera, but they might see something, hear something, feel something, and seeing Harriet Tubman and how they're relating to that, or Fannie Lou Hamer, just the image. So it's really a collection and a layer of how the stories were told and how they were put together.
Yeah, I love that the film was so real. So it wasn't like a re-injury of trauma. It wasn't that at all. It felt almost like a, what do you call it? This felt like a healing space, right? So it was beautiful. The women were all beautiful. And I was thinking, I wonder if this was intentional. Like, everybody get your glam on, get ready, because of the way we are generally kind of portrayed in the media. It was beautiful to see beautiful women talk about their truths, and they didn't have to be fantastical. They could be real, like my mother had this challenge, but the one woman started off saying, my mother, she could sing. Oh, she sings so well. And then she said, she didn't start off with, oh, my mother was on drugs growing up. She started off with the good stuff. My mother could sing so well. Everywhere we went, every time we went to church, they wanted to sing. And then she said that her mother had a drug problem. I was like, wow, that it came out, that didn't lead her thought about her mother, and I thought that was pretty powerful, right? And she talked about how she and her mother still had a relationship. I like what you said, Erica, about the spot cleaning. That was pretty powerful. I'm like, I'm gonna use that kind of spot cleaning. That was cool.
I don't know if you should adopt it or not, Kim. We'll see. The jury's still out. I don't have a therapist yet. We'll see.
I love it. You know, I teach trauma, so I thought that was, trust me, it's a good one. The other thing I liked was the African Center perspectives.
Yes.
Shout out to.
First of all, I love that accent because everywhere I go, I'm the most country person there. So I love that Shantrelle.
Same.
Shantrelle, like, I'm from Nolens and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, look at that. I like that. She didn't try to temper it, change it, and she just brought her full self. I love the elder woman. I can't remember her name.
Mama Coco.
Oh my goodness. What? I said, look at these African traditions and this celebration. And I just felt that movie, you know, I teach in academia. I'm a professor of African American Studies. And whenever we find somebody that understands African centered perspective, it feels like a cousin and it feels like home. And that movie felt like home to me. I expected to see, like, you know, people put on airs and pretend and show out and show up in that way. But instead, I'm like, oh, this is good. It was beautiful and crisp and honest and culturally rich. And so kudos to you all for that. It's a beautiful, beautiful piece.
Thank you. If I could, you know, add to that. So my undergrad degree from Howard, graduate degree from Temple, Africana Studies. Mama Coco was actually one of my professors at Temple. She taught me African religions, and you know, our school at Temple is African centered. So, and then me being from New Orleans, I'm always my accent is always the most pronounced in the room. So that was even intentional. You know, like Mama Coco herself identifies as a free Black woman. You know, she said, I came out of the womb free. And I self-identify in that way as well. And code switching feels very violent to me. You know what I mean? Like, yes. And having to code switch. And so, for my survival as a dark-skinned Black girl in New Orleans, and as a survivor, I needed to show up. My voice is what saved me. You know what I mean? And so any space that I enter, I take up space with my voice alone. And I wanted a range of not only perspectives, but accents. And like one of the things that was subtle and that JaSaun mentioned was that we were really even intentional about the soundscape. So like Desiree from the Caribbean, you know, there was like birds chirping, and then there was like the ocean playing. You know,
I heard that. I got it. I caught it. That's right.
And even intentional about Mama Coco, you hear all her accoutrements, her bracelets, even her walking through the house with her slippers on. So that was intentional, not to put any sound or any music, because like that is the sound, that is the music when you're in a Black woman's house. You know, like Tarana even talking about, oh, that's how you knew Mama was coming, because you heard them, you know, bangles.
Yes, bangles.
Like, you know, did we take out the meat to defrost? I'm like, child, I grew up in that type of household. Take the meat out to defrost.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Yes.
So, but that African centeredness, like as a scholar, as a curator, now as a filmmaker, you know, a storyteller overall, my view is African centered. It is global. It's diasporic.
Yeah, and it's beautiful. It is beautiful and rich. What about the added parts? I think JaSaun mentioned a little bit about where you put the little skit in there, and then you use that new technology where they're making the pictures talk and all of that. You put that in there. How? What? Where did it come from?
You know what's so funny? We did that before that technology even came out. I've just started seeing, I hired a friend who's from the Congo. He lives in the Netherlands, named Buba Dola. I hired him to do the animation. And then like a couple months ago, I saw that, you know, one of those ancestry companies, genealogy companies did this. I was like, wow, we did that in the film. So I just want to bring my grandparents to life. I'm like, I had a limited budget, I had limited resources, and I'm like, how do we recreate our mothers, our grandmothers' living rooms? How do we create these environments? Like, you know, we can't go to the Caribbean and shoot. How do we bring the Caribbean to us, and then thereby bringing our audiences to the Caribbean? You know, how do I transport people back into my grandparents' home to be a fly on the wall when my grandpa was like, boom, 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 Gladys. She like,
Right.
what, Joe? You getting on
Bring
my
me something
damn
sure.
nerves talking about in-store.
Right.
You know, and so it was just really like, we Black, we innovative, you know, we shape shifters, you know, like there was a Caribbean exhibition in Europe, and it was titled Who More Sci-Fi Than Us? You know, that's how we created jazz, hip hop, you know, spirituals, you know, the blues, like out of necessity, you know, when we needed to for our joy. And so it forced me to be to think outside of the box on how to get things done to tell this story.
Who put the fire in you all? So I know you talked about your mother's son, Shantrelle. I heard you, Erica, talk about your mother. Do you all attribute your boldness and being innovative and ending up in this space where you will be here talking about a film that you collaborated on? Do you attribute that to kind of your upbringing, all of you all, to your mothers and your upbringing at all, your upbringing at all?
Definitely, I do. My grandmother helped to found our family business, Mayfair. My mother ran the business, and not only was it a dance school, but we put on at least one huge production at places like the Chicago Theater that you see in the background every year. So I grew up with lights, with people, with love, with music and dance. And so my inspiration to study film and TV and communication really came out of that desire to continue in that way. And then along the way, I meet friends like Erica, who is super stylish to the bone. She's an artist. And then I meet Shantrelle, and she's art in motion with her voice and her style and how she sees the world. So yes, my mother was a foundational inspiration as a businesswoman and also as a producer in her own right. But really, I'm a reflection of the people around me and my friends. And so while I have my own ideas and my own vision, they also inspire me and keep me sharp and put me on to things and challenge me, and most importantly, encourage the fire that I have to fan brighter and bigger and to just keep going.
Let me add that you're talking about Mayfair Academy. You know, I didn't mention earlier, my daughter went to Mayfair. I said that my daughter graduated from Howard too, but she went to Mayfair as well for a few years.
So
as soon as you said those productions, I'm thinking, I remember those. Yeah, she attended that. What about you, Miss Erica?
Absolutely. I mean, I give it all to Iris and Corrine. Corrine Jones, my mother's mother, is now 97 years old. She's from Sunflower, Mississippi. She, I think, has maybe a 6th grade education. She has 6 kids who all got sent to college. And she is a firecracker and very bold. And you would think, and I said this in the film, but honestly, and this might be their coping mechanisms as well, but the way my grandmother is set up, it's like, I don't know, it's like she was born in another time, because she doesn't really, in terms of bold, she doesn't really suffer fools. She doesn't really think about limitations. And every time I try to dig on Mississippi, because I'm like, well, okay, because you've been in Ohio for so long, that's why you don't have no stories. She just says, I was in Mississippi, but Mississippi wasn't in me. And then she keeps it moving. You know? Because I think they were, you know, basically like all of her siblings were sharecroppers, you know. She somehow got out of that. You know, so it's that whole segregated life, right? When you're segregated, who you fearing? What is there to be afraid of? You don't even be around white people like that. So she went from Mississippi to Ohio, and it's just, I will never crack the case on this Ohio upbringing, because when I think about Ohio, with growing up with all these Polish kids, you know, my mom and my aunts and, you know, uncles, Like my mother was class president in the 50s. I don't understand it. The only Black woman in this white school. So like something happened with our ancestors where they were like, you're gonna know about racism, but you're gonna flow in a way that makes you unknow it a little bit. And I think or not be bothered by it, and you're going to teach your kids the same thing, right? So, and also another problem is my parents are both have a very healthy sense of self-esteem. They're both really, really, really into themselves. And so, really? Yes, like they're very confident. And so that confidence is all I've ever seen, you know? And so I think that's what I attribute, I guess, my boldness to.
Oh, okay. Yes, Miss Shantrelle. You already told me. Did you say you were born free? I agree with you. Me too. So is that where do you think you get it from your mama? As the song says, she get it from her mama.
I get it from my mama and my daddy. I mean, my mama is Aries, so also very self-confident. My mom don't ask nobody for permission for anything. I'm asking her about the film and she's running down the rest of her resume this morning. Oh, and I was the first state director, the Black one, after I was the director of this.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, man, so I'm gonna write these stories down for my grandchild. Girl, go and do that. And I was like, girl, the film is done. Like, well, you need to interview me so I could also share the rest of this. Oh, okay. And after Katrina, after Katrina, and I was traveling around talking about emergency preparedness. Okay. So that type of mother, and then a daddy who really had this, like, so, you know, New Orleans is very color struck. And y'all know New Orleans was because migration, half of y'all New Orleanians too, you know, by way of the migration. So New Orleans is very color struck. I'm brown, but in New Orleans, this is black, right? And so growing up in a colorist society, and then my dad and all his siblings were like my complexion and darker. And it was just like it was like stories about my great grandfather from Jamaica who came to Tuskegee. So I'm at least a 4th generation HBCU graduate. I've been able to trace back my family lineage to the 1700s to Haiti, where they came over to Philadelphia, where I'm now based, from Haiti in the late 1700s, early 1800s. Their son went down to New Orleans, learned French, moved up to Canada, was a part of the Underground Railroad, and then became the first US diplomat to Haiti. I'm said to be descended from Henri Christophe, the first king of Haiti. You know, like there's multiple people in my great grandfather was writing think pieces about Mussolini in 1945 in literary magazines, one of which was founded by my great aunt Aura May Lewis. So I knew my family's history. I knew my family's lineage. My dad said we ain't take shit up for white people because ain't too many of us was enslaved. I'm like, he talking shit until I'm looking up the census. Our names are listed, names listed. So when I said I was born free into a free family of Black folks as well. So as much as I get it from my mama, I get it from my daddy, but I get it from understanding my history and my lineage at a very, very early age. And since we're at DuSable, my whole career has been spent as a curator working at Black cultural institutions and museums, my entire career as a curator. The African American Museum in Philly is where I started. I went down to New Orleans after Katrina, the McKinney Museum of African American Art, then went up and worked at for Dr. Martha Moreno Vega at the Caribbean Cultural Center. So Black parents, even if y'all kids are at Black schools, teach them their history, let them know their identity. I was reading about Toussaint Louverture at like the age of 3 and 4. And definitely then in predominantly white schools, they need to know. So when you grow up knowing about your history, you know going about your family stories, like you're a proud people, you have this rich heritage, and not oh, it was like these people owning all of this stuff and having all this money and wealth to pass down, but like the stories, the pride, you know, like, our family, they were sharecroppers in Mississippi and they worked their land. And because of that, they was able to send somebody to school. You tell them that. Because then when you grow up understanding who you are in that way, you don't have to code switch. You don't have to seek other people's validation.
That's right.
Because you're validated by yourself. So, you know, it was a variety of experiences, but starting with like that knowledge of self. that was instilled within me by my parents.
Let me ask you all that in working on this film, did you find anything that you could say in the African Center understanding is the role and responsibility of mama? What is mama? What is the importance of mama to the family, to the society? What is the importance of mama? Did this film shed any light on that for you all? Are you all mothers? Anybody mothers? Nobody's a mother.
We'll be
Okay.
mothers soon,
Bonus
all of
mom.
us.
Yes. Bonus
Okay.
mother.
Bonus mother. So so that's even richer for me. Then I'm a mother, as I told you, my kids out my son graduated from Morehouse about 10 years ago. My daughter graduated from Howard, year for last. So I have a little bit of experience, but I want to know, did this help to shape your understanding then of what your role needs to be as a mama when you become a mama? What clues did you get from making this film and hearing all these stories about these mamas and then having this lived experience with mamas? What clues did you get?
I'll add, because even though I haven't biologically have my own children, or a child, I am mothering my bonus kids. And one other expectation that we have to become mothers. That's number one. I have some friends who don't
That's
want
right.
to mama,
Right.
and I have some friends who became mothers at an early age and they regret it. And I think because my mama also got married at a young age, and had mothers before she was ready to become a mother, it made me want to delay motherhood. And so now I'm in a role of like, oh, I got a 15-year-old and a man of Morehouse who's here right now. He's in his sophomore year. I can say it was important to me right now to heal and understand my relationship with my mama so that I can raise the most whole human beings that I can help to raise. And that I'm not passing down toxicity and dysfunction intentionally or unintentionally to another generation, because I haven't unpacked the shit, excuse my French, I'm from New Orleans, with in my own family, you know what I mean? And so in terms of the role, I think I think as a community, we've always understood the roles of mama. I think we need to do a better job of making life easier for mamas, right? Because everybody's like, I always love my mama, like she's my favorite girl, but then we burden them in so many ways, or we don't extend grace to them or compassion to them. It's like we expect Black women and mamas to like do it all. Before the film came out, I went to New Orleans because I hadn't gone since the COVID, even though my parents had been back and forth to see their grandkids in Chicago during COVID. I hadn't been home, and then I went home for a week, and then I went to Jamaica by myself, first time. And I told my bonus kids, I'm going to New Orleans and I'm going to Jamaica by myself. Because the healthier I am they call me Lulu, as a Lulu, that's going to be the better off I'm going to be for you. And so I think it's my role to then show my bonus daughter how to be in the world. But I have to embody that. I got to do that. I'm responsible for that. She's not. I can't be. So if I'm stressed out and then I'm, a little bit impatient or whatever like that, that's on me. That's my responsibility to handle myself. So I got to do things I got to sow into me so I can sow into her. Because if they ain't got nothing left to give, they ain't got nothing left to give.
Let me ask you this then. I think that when we think of African-centered understanding, right? So mama is not just biological. So even if you have no children, when we look at the traits and the core things that you all talked about in the film, when you look at the core things that you talked about mothers and these experiences with mothers, do you find yourselves did it inform the way you exist, period, as females? Because mothering in African-centeredness, you still mama. If you over somebody, kids around you, is mama so-and-so just by age, right? So we find ourselves, and I think just that's a trait of the Black woman kind of, and it was spoke about in the film some, like we gotta mother everybody, you know, we take care of everybody. It's the mama trait from this African-centered perspective that you're an elder woman. So you kind of nurturing and building and caretaking. And so did the film inform you all at all? It did me, so, but did it inform you all in any ways to see kind of how to navigate that, or what you're entitled to a little bit with regard to that role?
I think the film, again, is a collage of these stories and experiences and women and generations of women. And I think for me, I have experienced that my whole life.
Yeah.
I grew up in the same house with my grandmother. And the village that we, I think, relate to in an African-centered mentality or culture is not just, you know, singular or nuclear.
Right.
In addition to that, growing up in Chicago, I think, well, I know that my parents were intentional in how I was socialized. So I had my family, I had my Mayfair family, that's the dance school. And then I had my core friends, and Erica was one of my core friends. And it's not lost on me that my parents were intentional in supporting certain friendships, not to be elitist or create some kind of segregation, but to say, you know, Erica's family, we have, our values are aligned. And when you come home from being with Erica or being at Erica's house, you haven't lost your mind. The things that Erica's talking about, the things that Lauren or Rachel are talking about, that is healthy for you. And so that cultivates, I think, another type of family and mothering. And going back to the film, I don't think that it brought an especially new awareness to me, but hearing Erica talk about parts of her personality and parts of her life and who she is based on her grandmother and her mother, I did take something away from that. And I've known her for a very long time, but connecting it back to her mother and then back to her grandmother, I was able to pull from that and pull from all of the women that were in the film. And I think I've always done that, but seeing it on screen and seeing these different stories just gave it an extra push or impact for me.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I think the film was just, it was a celebration of womanhood, you know? It was, through this lens of mothers, but it was a celebration of womanhood. And though, like you said, although we know, you know, and you have friends and support groups, it's good to see somebody who you don't know and who does not know you and hear their story and relate to it. There's some kind of affirmation in that, especially when you're a free woman. You know that, Shantrelle. When you're a free woman, you exist in ways that are odd to people. And so people are always looking at you like, why are you doing that? Why, you know, why she act like that? Why she say that? What makes her do it that way? Or even be so vocal and bold with that opinion. You know what I'm saying? So you know it, people around you kind of get used to it. They have to, but to see that there are other people who exist in the world, and then to see them talk about their mothers. And so we know it to me, it reconnects this link, right? That we know is not new for me. You're odd. It's not new for me. This is where we come from, you know? Right. And this is what Black women have been. Women of African descent have been this, right? So it's more, we're in line with this freedom and who we're supposed to be, as opposed to having to act out of alignment, I'll say.
I was just going to add to that. For me, the film, what it feels to me like it's more of a call to action to investigate those women who came before you, right? And that's what it was for me. It wasn't like I was learning anything new. It was more a call to action to actually make inquiries, right? and investigate get under the hood, because I think the common theme for a lot of the women in the film is, I never really knew what was going on, and then I found out, or, you know, even I think about what Tina was talking about with her assessment of the relationship between her mother and her grandmother, and how they don't know how each other feels, but her outsider observation is that she's proud of, you know, everything they do is in service of making her proud. But, you know, there's this communication element that I think is very African centered, that for African Americans has been diluted as a coping mechanism because of the trauma that we've had, you know, coming here and so on, right? But you know, obviously we're a rich, in our original form, we're the richest in oral tradition, but everyone's mama might not be giving you the play-by-play of everything that happened.
Right.
You know, you come of age and you're like, yo, my mom was depressed, or my mom, you know, all the discoveries that these women are coming to as an older person, for me felt like it's a call to action to ask more questions.
Definitely. Because in going back to the title of the film, which is a nod, of course, to, you know, Alice Walker's seminal womanist collection of essays, In Search of Our Mother's Gardens. You know, she says, in search of my mother's garden, I found my own. And so, you know, again, it's in search of my mother's garden, we're in the garden in order to find our own. And so, you know, it wasn't like, again, a call to action to like for everybody to go and then mother and stuff. It's like an understanding. Now, if it's another call to action is to say the names of our ancestors, in also what Erica was saying in terms of like discovery, right? Is excavating the names of our ancestors. And that was very intentional for me. It was like, today my mama said, oh, I'm going to set up an ancestor altar for my ancestors. Now we got the same ancestors, right? But Pat said she was going to set up her own, right? Like when I was experiencing something I was going through recently, she's like, well, just call on your ancestors. I'm like, girl, you know, we have the same, at least on one side, you know, half of my ancestors are actually yours. But, you know, a friend who's always been agnostic as long as I've known her was like, she was setting up an ancestor altar. And so I'm like, you don't have to leave your liberation theologist, you know, church, shout out.
You know, I got an altar back there. Quit playing. You know, I got an altar in this house in the name of Jesus. I got an altar in the name of Jesus up in here. Okay?
Listen, Shantrelle, you need to know at our church, it's very much involved in African tradition. Yes.
I know. Yes, trust me.
Absolutely.
I have enough friends, but what I'm saying is y'all ain't got to leave that church.
That's right.
To call the names of your ancestors, which I'm sure y'all already are. And so it's not, even though I'm a Lukumi priest and I have my own ideas about religions outside of ATRs or African, you know, traditional religions, the very least is to call the name of our ancestors. That's the very least, the people who came before you, your bloodline. Right. You know,
and that's biblical, by the way.
Yeah, that's what I'm telling you. I hope that everybody enjoyed the film, and that those who watched it before this aired, and then those who didn't get the chance to watch it, who might just be catching a conversation, that they will go and watch the film. It is a very rich film, and I absolutely love it because it wasn't didactic. It's not forcing anything upon anybody. It's just real life conversations, you know, and it's beautiful in that way. And also, you know, I'm of the belief that you like, I tell my kids all the time, like, you give your children your secrets. So I think it's rich that I'm a little older than you all. I think it's rich that you all are unpacking, because people will do something and then they'll say, like, I don't know where it come from. And their parents, like, I don't know where it come from. And I'm thinking, it came from you, but you just covered it up and cleaned it up before they got on it. But it came from you, and it might have looked differently. The manifestation might be, you know, decorated differently, but the core is the same. It comes, you know. So in order for us, which is a good thing, because a lot of it is really good, you know. So I think it's important for us to unpack that, right, and have a look at it, so that then we can decidedly shift things if we need to, decidedly, instead of just existing, think we're doing something different. That's what cracked me up when you said, Erica, like, well, I don't know yet, therapy. I'm thinking oh, she gonna get to it. Because you find it later, it's there. You are your parents, it's there. And if you don't think so, then that means you haven't discovered it yet, but it's there. And then you get to unpack it and shape it towards where you want to go. So let me ask you all, what's first, let me ask you, Miss Shantrelle, what's next? What's next? Are you staying on the line of women? Are you gonna move around with what's next for you?
I'm a Gemini. I can't stay on the line of nothing too long.
Okay.
Erica likes to say I have this is my career, 5,278. So,
And she
Okay.
kills every single one of them,
Okay.
like
I
immediately on site.
Okay. All right.
So
Well,
yeah, I'm gonna do, I'm going to play with the medium of filmmaking a little bit longer for the next several years. I'm going to work on a film about my first trip to Nigeria. That's going to become a cult classic. Know that you heard it here first.
Okay.
I'm writing that with one of my Howard best friends, Joanne,
Okay.
who's half Nigerian.
Don't tell me too much about it because I don't want you to think I stole your idea when you see mine. So
Oh.
let's cut it.
Yo, there's room for 10,000 movies
true.
about one's first trip to Nigeria. So
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Create your
Mine
film.
is Ghana
sis.
though. Mine is Ghana.
Okay.
You know,
So,
I
yeah.
love Ghana. Yeah.
Create your story, sis. It's like, I mean, you see 10,000 movies on JFK, on Queen Elizabeth,
Yes.
on the
Yeah.
Crown, you know, so World
Yes.
Wars I and II. So it's space for many first trips to the continent.
Yeah.
Films to happen. But I was gonna also say, my husband and I, who's Nigerian, we have a company called Shop Black that our whole focus is amplifying Black-owned businesses. We were doing it before that it was a thing, it was a fad. And this year we'll finally be launching our global directory of Black-owned businesses. So I'm like really thrilled about that.
Wow.
Very, very excited about that. And there's on the altruistic side, right before I was about to say the hurricane, the pandemic, I met this sister named Tokozani in South Africa, Tokozani Ndaba, and she started a foundation for young Black girls who are the survivors of sexual assault. They live in these slums outside of Johannesburg. And so I'm really committed. I went there and fell in love with these girls' tenacity, their bravery, their joy, their vision. So I've committed to them. I've joined their board and committed to helping them raise the funds they need to create a safe center, a safe haven for these girls and their mothers and their families. And so I'm going to be working on that really, really soon.
So do you all have any advice for young filmmakers? Let's talk about the film industry side of it. Any advice for filmmakers, for people who have these burning stories like myself? Do you all have, what's your advice for people who want to break into the film industry?
It depends on the capacity. So if you want to break in as a writer, then you have to have lots of scripts. You can't just say you're a writer, right? And then I would try to find a writing program. There's a lot of, writing programs and fellowships and institutions and organizations that really foster emerging writers, especially emerging writers of color right now, because lots of stories need to be told, and Hollywood is finally trying to recognize that.
Isn't that beautiful?
It is beautiful. I think if you're trying to be a director, there's also programs for that, usually sponsored by studios, but I would also start in film school, where you have a whole cohort of people who are training and studying with you, and you could be working on their student projects to build your muscle, and then also start to network with them and pull each other up into these different projects. The ground up is PA work, so, and JaSaun can speak to that, because I'm only speaking to it because that's what I do for a living, but JaSaun actually has lived it. So
Oh, okay. Is there a particular site, like, do you all have, I see all these spaces on Clubhouse where people are talking about these things and then giving people resources and things like that. Is there a particular resource that you could think of that you would say to folks who want to find out more, or find out where to go, or where to enter?
There's guilds for everything, producer
Okay.
guild, writer guild, and they all have emerging talent programs, and they all can be a
Okay.
hub and a resource of information. You could call there and say, hey, I'm a queer Latinx man and I want to, start a writing career. What are the resources that you have available? They should be able to share. But I do think Twitter and social media is quite beneficial, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of writers are on Twitter.
Yeah, I agree.
And just really knowing the vocabulary of what you want to do. So even if you haven't been to film school, read the trades, the variety, and
Hollywood
broadcasting,
Reporter.
Hollywood Reporter. And if it's not film, but you're an artist and you want to make a film, you can still use those resources or be really, really in depth in your knowledge of what it is that you are passionate about. Like Shantrelle didn't go to film school per se, but she knows and came into this project, especially with a very deep background in understanding women and family and ancestry. And so that knowledge with a team of people who want to support your project will take you really far. She was able to communicate to me very clearly what she wanted to show and do. And then I said, oh, okay, that's the this, and that's the that, and that's called this, and here's how we do it. And then we were able to get it done.
I would just add too, I mean, if you're not trying to break into the industry formally and you're just trying to make a project, then make your project.
Make it.
That's what I say. I mean, make your project. You don't have to have any formal training to make your project these days. I mean, Issa Rae has a multi-million-dollar deal and she started on YouTube, right? And so there's no, if you have a following, if you have a network and you have a story to tell, do it. And I know that sounds like, okay, yes, sometimes there's money involved. That's where your network comes in, and
Okay. All right. Well, you all have done a great job. I would like to commend you all. It is beautiful work that I probably would have did myself. It's fantastic. That says a lot.
That's a high compliment.
That says a lot for me. It's very rich and it was very unique and creative. It's a beautiful piece. It's a beautiful piece, and I think that everybody should see it, and everybody would learn something from it and feel something from it because it's that well done. Is there a final word you would like to leave with your viewers that you would like to say about the film, about mothers, about anything?
I would say, first of all, shout out to my niece, Anaya Marie Scott, my little mini me. I got to shout her out everywhere, and Sincere, her little brother, my little nephew. Shout out to Array. That's my final word. Array, Tulane Jones, Ava DuVernay, for amplifying Black stories. People are like, oh, how did you get your film on Netflix? Array, they're committed to telling Black stories. They're committed to providing a platform for these stories to get out. There's so many filmmakers who have stories to tell, who have films, and nobody ever sees them. And this film could have easily been in that situation. It could have been something that I created and made, and nobody would have ever seen it. And so they were hyper supportive from the beginning. They were relentless in making sure that people around the world would get to see and hear these stories, and that, Blackness is a monolith. So there's space for so many other stories. So if there's something in Our Mother's Gardens that you don't see, go and create it yourself. This film is not going to be everything to everybody. And there's a lot of, I won't say shortcomings, but there was a story told through my lens as a cisgender, Generation X woman from the US Black American South by way of New Orleans, who is an African-centered Shango priest, Kawo Kabiosile. So, if there was something that you didn't see, make it yourself, create it, expand upon it. And just thank you, DuSable. Thank you, Kim, for the work that you do. And Erica and JaSaun for lending your voices, your spirit, your passion, your beauty, your grace, and your support and helping this project cross the finish line.
I think my closing remark is, making a film is a really beautiful experience. And I think an audience gets to see the finished project or product, and it's great and it's enjoyable. And this project has been great and it's been enjoyable. But Shantrelle in particular, as a director and executive producer, the amount of care, consideration, and creativity, the amount of phone calls and emails and texts and reading and research that goes into creating art, that goes into creating a film, that's not just a postcard of what I know and what I think I know and what I want to show, something that's really for people and that makes a statement. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of people coming together. And so I really want to give all of us a round of applause, and Shantrelle in particular, for having the tenacity and the audacity to put out this work of art and to actually do the work behind it. So applause to you and thank you. And In Our Mother's Garden is on Netflix right now.
Yes.
Perfect note to end on. Thank you all for allowing DuSable to share with you, for sharing with us. We appreciate
you. Thank you, DuSable.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim. I love Chicago. Sexiest city in the States
Right on.
outside of New
When you
Orleans.
come, we have to have lunch or something. Thank you all.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye.